Hey, everybody. This is Mo, and it's the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, Identity and Influence Edition. I'm sitting here with the very dapper looking Dr. Lem Usita. What's up?
Always excited and always looking forward to our conversations about leadership. And yeah, man, I know I keep saying this, but I'm definitely excited for this one. So let's go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Welcome to the YouTube audience. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Drop some comments. We want to know whether you agree with us or not. And Dr. Lem's gotten some comments, people pushing back on him, and we love it. So the name of this leadership lesson that we're talking about today is Identity and Security and the Performance Trap. You say that leaders collapse, not because they lack skill, but they collapse because they're performing. So help me understand, what does it look like when leadership shifts from stewardship to performance art?
Yeah, I love that question. One of the things that we constantly say on this podcast is you lead out of who you are. And when you're leading out of who you are, then it's not a performance of self. It's not a performance of leadership. You're just showing up as yourself and you're being yourself in your leadership. I think so many people perform their leadership like they have to have this look, they have to be this loud, they have to be upfront, and they're trying to project something that they're not. Which I totally get. And that makes sense why people might think that way. Many times it's not who they are though. It's just a performance of a role or performance of what they think leadership should look like. And that's not the same as leadership. Now, for somebody on the outside, we might look at it and we might think, oh, they're being a leader. But some people are just performing leadership and not leading out of who they are. You know that saying, fake it until you make it?
I do.
Like some people never make it, and they never make it. And because they never make it, they just continue to fake it. And you can fake it for a season and hopefully you make it. But if you're always faking it, you're just performing leadership and it gets tiring. It steals your energy.
So when I take leaders through the DISC assessment, especially those who are high D or high C leaders, I can't tell you how many times I see that there's an over-functioning disguised as excellence.
Yeah.
And so if you've read Dr. Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, and I know you have, but for people out there, if you haven't read that book, you got to pick it up. She's great, but she shows that perfectionism is often what she calls armor, and it's not excellence. And so my question, a follow-up would be, how do we distinguish healthy excellence from identity-driven performance? Like, what would you say about that?
I mean, identity-driven performance is leading out of who you are. I think the nuance there is some of us haven't done enough work to figure out who we are. And so we're still performing, you know? And so part of this is to really spend some time learning, like you said, like take the DISC assessment so that you truly know your preferences, you truly know your personality, you truly know like this is the way that I work best. And then you lead out of that. And then it allows you then to communicate to your team and to others that you're working with, hey, this is the best way to work with me.
Yeah.
You know, like this is the way that I communicate. This is the way that I lead. This is the way that I like to collaborate. And then when you're leading out of who you are, when you really have done your work trying to figure out your identity, then you can lead like in excellence. You're not trying to be someone that you're not. And so that's probably my take on it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Speaking of behaviors, we see over preparation, micromanaging, hypersensitivity when people get criticized. These are rewarded short term. So why are they so dangerous in the long term?
They're dangerous in the long term because it takes energy and focus to keep up the performance, right? And I don't think we think about how things are rewarded in the short term because, you know, we just see them being rewarded. And that's what we're talking about here. Anytime you lead out of who you aren't, anytime you're performing your leadership, you pay a price. And the question is that price worth paying? Like you're paying the price of energy, you're paying the price of your time, and you're having then to manage. And part of the reason why we're having this conversation is we want to highlight this for people.
Yeah.
When you look at the behaviors that you brought up, over preparing, micromanaging, hypersensitivity, they're all managing either a process or a thing or a feeling. And like we say in this podcast, if you're managing, then you're not leading. And anytime you're managing, just understand that there's a cost there, right? And so behaviors like over preparation, micromanaging, and hypersensitivity to criticism is about something external. It's about the performance of leadership. If you're leading out of who you are, then who cares what people say? You know what I mean? And who cares like their perspective? You're doing it to the best of your ability and you're doing it out of who you are. Then it's not performance.
This reminds me of research in the Journal of Applied Psychology on cognitive load. So when leaders
Yeah,
split
that's it.
attention, right, between decision making and self monitoring, the executive functioning drops. And
Yeah.
so the internal question always is, well, how's this going to make me look? And that
Yeah.
fractures clarity because it takes the attention off what's important, because you can't focus on others and focus on yourself at the same time.
Oh, when you say that there's a cognitive load for making those decisions, there's also in the background an emotional load because you're asking emotional questions. How will they think about me? How will I come across? You don't want to look like an idiot, you know?
Yeah.
So then you overperform on what you think other people's expectations are of you because your validation is external. Your validation as a leader is from other people. And so yeah, it's a cognitive load, but underneath that there's this emotional load of like needing to feel like you're doing it right, needing to feel validated for your actions. Yeah, that's a great insight.
And when I deal with insecure leaders, they ask questions like, well, how is this going to be received?
Yeah.
Instead of what's right. And so how does that internal shift quietly start draining our energy?
Man, that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned as a executive leader when I first moved into my executive role. When you're doing what's right, it's going to hurt people's feelings, right? It just will. Your feeling and your feelings might get hurt. And then this goes into what you're asking, like how will this be received? That's your feelings. That's tied into yeah, your feelings and maybe even hurting other people's feelings. Yeah, but when you're focused on the right things, when you're doing the right things, when you're clear on vision, when you're clear on this is where we're headed, then feelings are almost secondary. Now I know I'm sounding like a D style right now, not caring about other people's feelings, right? But the question is, when you're doing things right and it's hard. Leadership is hard. And so when you're doing what's right, it's gonna hurt people's feelings. When you're leading out of who you are, you're not needing to apologize for any of that. Now, you still need to be kind, you need to be gracious, and you need to show mercy where it's needed, but you don't necessarily need to apologize to do for the things that you do that are right. So yeah, I think it's a leadership lesson that we all need to learn, especially as new leaders that are still needing that external validation.
There's a great book called A Failure of Nerve by Edwin Friedman. I'm not sure if
Hmm.
you've read that before.
I've not
It's
read that one. Yeah.
incredible. So what he says is that anxious leadership spreads systematic anxiety. So if you as the leader are internally
Yep.
unstable, the team is going to feel it. And
100%.
it now you might think that you're masking it, but you're not. You might be able to fool your superiors, but you're never going to fool the people that are looking to you for leadership. So, from an identity standpoint, what do leaders do to build the internal steadiness so that they stop scanning the room for approval? Have you run into that, and what do you help people do?
That's a great question. Um, the easy answer is stabilize your identity and get to know who you are and lead out of that. But we're having this conversation because it's not necessarily a thing that people do. It's not normal to like spend time processing through your feelings and your thoughts and getting into your identity because it's hard work, right? I think knowing this concept, the fact that you just shared that concept to people that are listening to this, that's a great first step. I think the next step after that is to take your disc assessment if you haven't done that yet,
Yeah.
because it's gonna help you with a wonderful picture of your identity. It's gonna help you with a better understand your style, and then once you're solid in your style, whatever style your disc assessment might show you, then you can start ordering your world around your style. If you need that affirmation from folks, ask for it. but don't like sit there, and try to guess what people want. If you know you need that affirmation, ask. And so, and it really does give us a clearer picture of ourselves and then our leadership practice when you understand your disc style. And so, like one of the ways that you can work on getting to know yourself and learning your identity as a leadership is to really take that disc assessment. And so for those of you that haven't done this, like, sign up for it at Rising Tide Leadership. And honestly, for those that have done their disc work, like they're not necessarily struggling with this because they know their style.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about identity insecurity and how it shows up. Doesn't matter what level
Okay,
you're at, it's going to show up. So
a hundred
you
percent.
outline in this work that it manifests differently at the early, mid, and senior levels, depending on where you're at. So this affects everybody. This affects every leader at every stage. So
Yeah.
why does identity insecurity sometimes increase with promotion rather than decrease? Because I would think, or I don't anymore, but I would have thought that, oh, as I get higher, I'm going to care less about what people think. I'm going to be more secure in who I am. But that's not how it is.
Yeah. I like the brilliance of that question that you just asked is you're not asking how do you get rid of your insecurity, right? That's not what we're saying. But you're able to better deal with your insecurity as you grow older. Like the first example that comes to mind is Steve Jobs. Like his insecurity, he turned it into a strength and he made that it made him it made him a strong leader. But it was all born out of insecurity. When you start looking at great leaders and like even leaders up at the top, like they're really good because they capitalize on their insecurity. So when leadership is used to stabilize who you are, that external validation, then you get stuck in that cycle. Then you need that external validation, and then your performance is shaped by that external validation. If you're operating out of who you are, then you're just being yourself in your leadership, and it takes way less energy to just be yourself. In fact, if you are yourself, it energizes you in your leadership. And when you're performing leadership, it sucks energy from you. And so I mean, what we're saying here is if you're leading out of who you are, it'll actually energize you. And if you're performing your leadership, that's going to suck energy from you. And so at different levels of leadership, I would say that you get those promotions because you become more secure in your insecurity and you use your insecurity to lead. So like if you have an insecurity, for like one of my insecurities as a D style is like I need help with details, straight up, you know? That's one of the things that's lacking in my D style. And so as I grow in my leadership, I start bringing people around me that, you know, have that S style or that C style that kind of help me in my insecurity. And so like, you just kind of get better at shoring up your weaknesses and your insecurities because, you're solid in your insecurities. I know it's so counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Don't get rid of your insecurities, like be solid in it so that you can be a stronger leader. It's just so counterintuitive. But how does it show up for you?
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking about all the time we've spent talking about imposter syndrome. And so, I mean, like take the Harvard Business Review, for instance, right? They talk about imposter syndrome a lot and how imposter syndrome actually intensifies with increased responsibility.
Yes,
So
yes, yes. And you get stuck in it. Yeah.
you get stuck. And so you're talking about the D style. To talk about the I style leaders, those who are the inspirational life of the party leaders, sometimes they overseek affirmation, and as soon as you start overseeking affirmation, it's like a
It becomes
drug
about that. Yeah, it
because
becomes about that.
that's what you need. You need
Yeah.
people to see you, to hear you. You need to make sure that what you said, because you spend a lot of time making sure that you're going to say the right things. And when you don't get
Yeah.
that affirmation, man, it totally messes with you. So let me ask you this. So let's take, for instance, a mid-level leader, right? They especially, you mentioned, have emotional overfunctioning, right? They're carrying responsibility without the authority. They're not at the bottom and just doing stuff. They're not at the top and telling people, hey, this is how it's going to be. They're kind of stuck in the middle. And so
Hmm.
they've got all this responsibility that they're carrying. They don't have the authority. Why is this an energy leak for people like that?
Man, that's a really great question, and I like this idea of this cycle. And then when you get stuck in this cycle of emotional overfunctioning, I think part of the reason why that is the case is because you haven't set boundaries. You haven't set boundaries for yourself and for your leadership. I know lots of young leaders that like haven't set boundaries and then they get stuck in the cycle. You're being used in your leadership because you don't have those boundaries set. And because you don't set boundaries, there's an emotional drain on your energy, and it's hard to maintain that because you're operating out of your identity. You're operating in a performance of leadership, not out of your leadership identity. And there's a shift that can happen, but you have to be honest with who you are, and you got to be honest with others. And sometimes it's setting boundaries. It's knowing the boundaries. Think about it, as a mid-level leader, you say yes to everything, right?
But yeah.
But you got to learn how to say no and how to have boundaries in your leadership. And it's counterintuitive. If you're able to show boundaries, then people will give you more responsibility because they know you can handle it. And so, yeah, I think mid-level leaders can get stuck in this cycle because they don't know how to say no and set boundaries. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it reminds me of Dr. Bowen, and he has his theory. I know you've heard this theory, the Bowen family systems theory, where he would look
Hmm.
at families and he said, okay,
Yeah.
what does it take to be an actual family unit instead of just a collection of individuals? And he said that overfunctioning on your part creates underfunctioning in others. And so
Somebody else. Yeah.
when you have people looking at you, if you're overfunctioning, it's going to cause them to emotionally disengage because they're going to think, well, no matter what I do, it's always, well, I'm going to, my leader, he's going to check my work or she's going to just redo this anyway. So I don't even need to do that. And so if I want to stabilize my identity as being a team member, that's much different than trying to be indispensable. And when you're trying to be indispensable, you end up spinning way too many plates. And then you
Yeah.
start thinking as a leader, why are people disengaging? I'll tell you why they're disengaging, because you're trying to do everything. You're not trusting your team. And
Yeah.
so I totally thought about Dr. Bowen and his theory and how we as leaders need to invite people into the process. So the question for leaders out there is, are you inviting your team into the process, or are you too busy becoming indispensable?
Yeah. Yeah.
So with that,
Boundaries.
yeah,
That's exactly it. Setting boundaries. Right.
I can't tell you how many conversations I have with young people, especially about setting boundaries, and it's a foreign concept to them. In fact, there's a book called Boundaries, and if you haven't read it, you got to read it. I
Kyle
don't love
Townsend.
anecdotes, yeah, but Townsend gives this great anecdote in the beginning, and then spends the entire book and talking about how this lady who has this fictional character, this lady, she has no boundaries, and at the end, right, all of a sudden she has created healthy boundaries, and how different it doesn't just make her life, but her family, the people she works with, her bosses, the people that look to her. So, gosh, people, you got to set boundaries out there. So, talking about senior leaders, they're the ones who struggle with subtle indispensability, right?
Hmm.
They need to be needed. But the higher you get, the less you're actually doing. And you're really just making, or you should be making important, big decisions and letting your people be the rock stars and getting all the attention. But that
Yeah.
doesn't work for some people. And
Yeah.
so, why is stepping back so threatening to insecure identity?
Man, when you build your leadership on what you do in order to be needed, you lose your sense of self and your value as a leader when you step back. And so, and man, I've seen so many senior leaders that like operate like this, like, well, I'm the senior leader, I need to be needed. And we are asking you to step into your leadership and lead out of who you are. So what's needed is you, not what you can do for your company, right? And so there's a huge difference, and one energizes you and one depletes you of your energy. And so, yeah, an insecure leader will need to be leaded, and a secure leader will just build their team in such a way that they are not needed, right?
Yeah.
And that insecure leader that needs to be needed is going to lose energy because it's going to be performance of leadership and not a leadership born out of who you are. Yeah. That's a great question and a great insight. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, it's going to come as no shock to you that I'm going to mention one of both of our favorite books Jim Collins' Good to Great, and what it takes to go from a good to great company to be a great leader. He talks about level 5 leaders. And
Hmm.
those are the ones who have a personal humility and a professional will. So they're not looking to be liked. They already know that what they're doing is important. And so that
Exactly.
humility
Yeah.
requires identity security. So they are
Exactly.
secure in their identity. Here's what's funny. How many times have we laughed together about people who think that they are a higher level of a leader than they really are?
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll say, "Oh, I'm not a level 5 leader, but I'm level 4." And I'm like, "Dude,
Yeah.
you might be a level 2 leader, maybe on a good day."
Yeah.
But people who are thinking they're a level this or level that, they're already dealing with their own insecurities.
Yes.
I, I only personally know one level 5 leader.
Yeah.
Well, I might know two, but both of those guys would never even think of themselves as a level 5 leader, but they are.
Exactly.
That's what makes them a
Exactly.
level 5 leader because they've
Exactly.
got that
Yeah.
humility. So
Yeah.
so when it comes to identity, being secure so that our leaders, because we want our leaders out there, we want everybody to be a level 5 leader.
Hmm.
What practices can help senior leaders or those jumping up in levels of leadership detach self-worth from the positional authority? Because there's got to be a difference.
Yeah. I mean, I think you mentioned it in how you described it. The more you get to know yourself and the more secure you are in yourself, the more you're just leading out of who you are. The DISC assessment will help you to do that, right? And I like that you tied insecurity to performance and security to humility, right? But I think we all have a picture of leadership being big and loud and not humble. You know what I mean? And so like
Yeah.
and I love that you tied a level 5 well, Jim Collins says the level 5 leader exudes humility. A level 5 leader would never call himself a level 5 leader. Everybody else does. And so, yeah, I mean, you just kind of laid that out for us. Again, it's so counterintuitive to like pursue humility, but humility breeds security. And when you're secure, then you can be who you are. And when you're being who you are, then your leadership is energized by just being you.
Yeah.
You're not having to perform it. Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
good.
So let's talk about the antidote, which is identity anchoring. You propose that anchoring identity before high stakes decisions, that is very important. So what does it practically mean to clarify what is not at stake?
Yeah. Well, the way that I was thinking about that is when you can get clarity on the role versus self, I think that really helps. I recently did a study on role value versus your market value. And role value is what the company pays you to do a thing, right? Market value is what you could get paid because of who you are, you know?
Hmm.
And when you pick a job based on your role value, you're stuck on what the organization deems as value for your role. But your market value might be higher, but if you get stuck at your role value, then you feel stuck, right? If you can find an organization that knows your value and hires you for who you are, not what you can do for the organization, then it shifts dramatically, right? Because you're being recognized for your market value, for who you are. So clarify who you are before you get stuck performing a role that you can do and isn't at your market value. Yeah, leading out of who you are. And again, like these categories really help you to understand like there's a role that you play as a leader and then there's who you are as a leader. And so, I think many people, and I look back at my career, my professional career, and I think I've gotten stuck a couple of times in a role, and I've had to do that role, and it costs you energy, and you're not valued for your market value because you're just paid to do a role. And I like that, like in many situations I just bowed out of that role because I'm like, no, I think I'm better than this. But it takes humility though to do that, right? And it's because the insecurity keeps you in that role. And I think the humility to understand that this is, how you're made, like then you can set up those boundaries to say, yeah, I'm not gonna do this, and I'm gonna honor and value myself and bow out. So
I'm, I'm going to get deep on you right here, and you're going to
let's go.
appreciate this in your psychology background. Remember Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning,
Huh?
he said that meaning precedes circumstance.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
not the outcome that defines me. And
Yeah.
so I had to learn that. It wasn't about the outcome. I'm different in my identity. And if I'm anchored in who I am, just like you said, because I have a
Yeah.
role at a company, just because I do that role, good or bad, that doesn't define who I am. And so
Yeah.
that's why I love talking to pastors about. As a pastor myself, I always tell people it's not about how many people, come to church. It's not about how many butts are in the seats, although that's important because people need to come and hear the gospel. But your meaning is far deeper than that. Your circumstances are going to change. You're going to have ebbs and flows. There's going to be good times and bad times, but you have to be anchored in your identity. And so for me, my identity is in Christ, right? And
Yeah.
so for those pastors, they are. Now, if you don't have religion, you got to get it. But my question for you leaders is what is your identity anchored in? Because what
Yeah.
Dr. Lem's talking about here is if you are looking for other ways to make yourself feel better about yourself and it's outside of your identity and you don't know who you are, you're just going to
Yeah.
be chasing your tail. Am I getting it right?
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. I love it.
Yeah.
It's definitely, and these are things that I don't think people necessarily connect to leadership, right? We're talking about
Yeah.
identity here. We're talking about like soul stuff, like in meaning and depth. And yeah, I don't think this is a natural and a normal leadership conversation, but I love that you highlight that deep sense of meaning anchors your identity. It anchors your leadership, and then you can lead out of it. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So let's kind of round third base here, talking about the practical. You talk about the leadership credo exercise. Man,
Yeah.
that is powerful. So why does articulating, well, first of all, what is the leadership credo exercise? And why does articulating what criticism am I willing to endure stabilize decision making?
Well, your leadership credo really takes a look at your mission, your vision, your values. Again, it's just clarity on, your leadership identity. It's clarity on who you are. And then criticisms can come, and it doesn't matter what the criticisms are because you're solid and you're secure in who you are. The other thing that it does is if you're clear on who you are, if your leadership credo is clear for you, it keeps you out of trash roles, right? Knowing your market value helps you to find roles that are in that range. And then you get to decide your value. You get to decide, your worth, and the role doesn't do that for you.
Yeah, man. It reminds me of Angela Duckworth, right?
Yeah.
And in her
Grit.
book Grit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, phenomenal book. Um, and that shows in Grit, she talks about how endurance is tied to purpose clarity. And just like you mentioned, I've got to be completely clear. I got to be crystal clear on my purpose because when I know that and I know what I'm willing to endure, I'm going to stop negotiating my values in the moment. And so it makes me think of another great book, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink.
Willink.
He said,
Yeah.
the reason that I never gave up is because I knew what I was willing to endure. I knew that no matter what they do, they can't kill me. So if I can just hold on, right? And so
Yeah.
for him,
Outlast.
he just had to outlast them. He said, if other people have passed this class, I can do it too. And
Yeah.
he knew what he was willing to endure. That was the grit that he was able to bring into his life. And so I guess my question for you, when you talk about this in the article is, how does that reduce emotional exhaustion when I have clarity of purpose?
I mean, we've kind of been talking about it this entire episode. You're not wasting your emotions on seeking out external validation. You're not wasting your emotions on a performance of yourself. Like when you're leading out of you who you are, like we said, like it just energizes you because you're doing the thing that you were created to do. And so the work that we have to do is get clear on our credo, get clear on our purpose, get on our vision statement and what our values are. And those are all in the realm of identity. And if we get clarity on our identity, then we're being energized in what we do.
So last one, strategic silence.
Yes,
Make the
sir.
decision, state it clearly, don't over explain. Why is this discipline hard for insecure leaders?
I think insecure leaders need to justify their existence and their worth. And an insecure leader typically is doing the performance of leadership and waiting for that external validation. But when you know your value, when you know your worth, you don't need to over explain. Like we were saying earlier, if you're doing the right thing and you're secure in your leadership, it's going to hurt people's feelings. You might get your feelings hurt by doing this job, but like you got to kind of toughen up, you know?
Yeah.
And this is something that I learned early on as a leader, and I am continuing to learn because I'm leadership depth, right? I think the higher you get in leadership and the more you experience at a higher level, that needs to find its anchoring in the depth of who you are, in the depth of your humility, in the depth of, your purpose. And so, yeah, I'm working through this one. Like I see the identity work getting deeper and deeper so that the influence can grow higher and higher, right? It's tied
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, it's funny. I deal with a lot of leaders, and in my coaching sessions, I see a ton of leaders over explain. And the reason they do this is because they equate clarity with approval. And
Yeah.
then I see what you wrote, and you said clarity is leadership,
Yeah.
excessive justification is anxiety. And I thought, oh man, that is leadership gold right there. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. No, it's true.
yeah, so when you wrote that, when you were thinking, if I've got to be clear in my expectations, both of myself and my team,
Yeah.
how does practicing restraint instead of over explaining, help me keep away from being a performative leader?
Yeah, you're gonna spend energy doing both, right? So you're gonna spend energy getting clear, or you're gonna spend energy over explaining. The easier work is to spend the energy getting clarity for yourself so that when you communicate it, you don't have to explain. I'm definitely processing through this one because, I want to over explain because I want people to get it. Or I could just spend the time getting clarity for myself so that when I explain it the first time, that they're not necessarily asking questions. Let me give you something super practical for me. Like what that looks like for me is I tend to like be a little bit more philosophical, and I'm not really operational because in my mind, I think operational is easy, right? I just think everybody will get the operational stuff if I just give them like really good philosophy, right? Or a really good philosophical background for it. And I recognize that like I can give the philosophical background, but I also have to operationalize it for people. And that is the clarity of mind and the clarity that I need in order to say, okay, so this is what this looks like, because I just want them to like understand philosophically what this thing is. And then I just assume that they're going to put it into practice. And so that's something practical that I'm working on. Like give the philosophical foundations, but also make it operational for them so that it's easy.
Man, I love it. So, leaders, here's the question I'm going to leave you with based on this article. It's the question that I asked myself, and I'm going to ask you, and this is your job to journal this. And if you are really brave, you can even drop your comment in the comment section. But here it is. Who are you when your
Yeah.
title fluctuates?
Yeah.
Simple question. Who are you when your title fluctuates? Are you grounded in identity, or are you overcompensating somehow? And so with that, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Check us out at rtclc.com. Take your DISC assessment. Reach out to us. We would love to be a part of that. Dr. Lem, man, I am fired up.
Yeah. Great
Great
conversation,
article.
man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
Thanks for having me.
We'll do it again soon. But until then, thank you.
Yes, sir.